We're at the South Carolina Water Resources Conference. I'm Donna London. Joining me this afternoon is Mr. Rick DeVoe. He is the Executive Director for the South Carolina Sea Grant Consortium. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Now, this is, I believe, the third time that I've attended the conference, but it's been going on a little longer than that.
It has.
And you have been a part of it over the years, and you're part of the planning committee. Tell me some of the insights that you've gleaned over the course of the last 2 days, and how that differs from some of the conversations that you were having over the last three conferences until this one.
Well, a couple things I think have come up at the meeting. One is this, the talk about the water plan and the need for the state to come up with a water plan, the need for resources to make that happen. My observations about water are how we deal with it. In our conversations as a natural resource, it sort of falls in one category, but I think it needs to be looked at more as an infrastructure need for our state,
right?
And be part of the conversation along with roads and bridges and other needs like that, because it's critically important. Without water, without the infrastructure to provide water and treat water, the others will, you know, it'll be a constraint.
Sure, sure. And I understand with a lot of the discussions over the last couple of days that were focused on the statewide water plan. There were a few conversations about the green infrastructure component, and perhaps if we could be looking at it more in that way, that we might make progress a little sooner.
Definitely, I think so, yeah.
And in terms of the statewide water plan and your organization, the South Carolina Sea Grant Consortium, what will that mean for your organization and what you can do, and also what your role might be within the planning process?
Yeah. Well, my agency works with faculty and staff and students from 7 of our state's universities and the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. So we have, we have the opportunity and the luxury of having access to that expertise and that capability. We look at water in the context of 2 things: water quantity and water quality. Water quantity with respect to the coast is a function of our rivers and our upstate, because a lot of the water that ends up along the coast, freshwater, is coming down our river systems. So changes along the coastline, sea level rise and such, are going to affect that dynamic between the freshwater and the saltwater, which has major implications for how we manage our water resources along the coast. That's one example.
And I know that you were giving a paper earlier today. Before we talk about that paper, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the workshops that your agency was hosting, I believe, and organizing related to climate change, and particularly climate change along the coastal communities of South Carolina.
Well, we have a person who's our coastal climate extension specialist working in our office. She works jointly with the University of South Carolina and their coastal integrated science and assessment program on climate-related issues. And it's not so much that we work on climate, but we're working on changes in features and water, sort of the way water is dealt with along the coast. So we have been working with several local communities and talking with them about how they may be able to incorporate, let's say, sea level rise changes, increases in flooding, and so forth into their planning process. And that more and more local communities are paying attention to that, because people on the ground are seeing the effects of these changes in their daily lives as they travel to work, as they go to the beach, and they visit up and down the coast. And another respect is our fisheries. When we see changes in water, fresh water, there are potentially changes along our shoreline and our salt marsh and our salt waters. There's a wedge where the freshwater and saltwater meet can change. So in drought conditions, that saltwater wedge can move up the river some, and that has potential implications for our industries that depend on fresh water for a variety of purposes.
Right. It's been interesting to hear about that over the course of the days,
yes.
listening to what's happening to our blue crabs and
right. Yes. Yeah.
some of our other resources along the coast. I know that some of your work has also involved looking at the stormwater management ponds that may have a few issues as we begin to encounter sea level rise and climate change in general.
Yeah, I think stormwater ponds throughout the state, but especially along the coast, are used as a primary means by which stormwater is treated. So when there's a development built or let's say commercial site constructed, the ponds are constructed because there's usually fill material needed for the foundations for the buildings, but then those ponds are also used as ways to capture stormwater so that doesn't run off completely into our estuarine systems. There are a lot of ponds. There's thousands and thousands of ponds in our 8 coastal counties, and we know there are many, many more throughout the state. We have been supporting research primarily in some outreach programs, looking at certain aspects of these ponds and how they function. And they were built primarily to manage water quantity, but more and more they're being used to manage water quality, to capture runoff from the adjacent areas and the pollutants that might come in that water, runoff from roads or from wherever. And there seems to be a feeling that they have a half-life. Right. That over time they're probably not as functional as they were when they were first built. We also, because of the changes along the coast and the changes in our shoreline and the changes potentially in the sea, in the rising sea and the subsidence that's occurring along our coastline, that maybe over time that these ponds may be subject to some flooding themselves, which we need to consider as we develop plans for the future and where we put things. And
it may be time for the people surrounding those ponds as well to be thinking about how we are going to try to either refocus them or redraft them, redevelop them,
retrofit,
and look for other ways of ensuring that we are taking care of our stormwater, but understanding that we have changing circumstances facing us.
Oh, yeah, we do. And the responsibility for that is in multiple places. I mean, a lot of the ponds are under the responsibility of homeowners associations as part of the transfer of the common property on planned developments from the developer to the homeowners. Right. And I think in some cases that presents challenges for them because of the lack of resources or knowledge or expertise that might be necessary to be able to manage ponds efficiently. Local governments deal with this on a regular basis, and the stormwater managers have to address various issues. And the state has certain rules and policies with respect to those too. So what we're trying to do is to pull together some of the expertise in the state that are studying these ponds, look at it in a holistic way, and then work with the decision makers and others who have a responsibility for managing these ponds for the future.
And sometimes people wonder why we don't believe the scientists and why we need to be worrying about that now. Right. And this, unfortunately, is going to be one of those cases that if we don't do something now and listen to what has been studied for a number of years.
Right. And we're seeing it on a day-to-day basis. And if we just think about that and we look at it down 10 years down the road or 20 years down the road, that should provide a message that we need to, there's reasons to do it today, but there's also more reasons to do it for tomorrow.
Right, right. Well, Rick DeVoe, I want to thank you for joining us today. I probably should let you go because I know you already have to start planning the next conference with your committee, because it takes that, I know.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but anyway, it's been a great conference. Your planning group has done a terrific job.
That they have,
and
yes.
I want to ensure that we stay in touch about the work that the South Carolina Sea Grant Consortium is doing.
Very good. Thank you so much for having me.
I've been speaking with Mr. Rick DeVoe. He is the director for the South Carolina Sea Grant Consortium. For the Jim Self Center on the Future, I'm Donna London.